Hello DevOps people, I am back. I'm sorry for the shoddy schedule recently, but yeah, it's a bit turbulent at the moment, and I was struggling to keep my scheduled slots because I had to tackle incidents, state data center outages, or simply had to do some official things like going to the post office to do some urgent things, and so I apologize for not being as reliable as you might have been used to. I'll make an effort of being on time for the near future. So, let's dive right in. Today I'm going to continue with my Rails project. I'm still working on the hosting dashboard for that we use in my company, and I'm happy to report that I'm making progress. Let's see where we left off last time. Here we go. That's the issue from my last session, last week. And I wanted to replace the authorization gem in my Rails application. Back when I started the application, I chose CanCanCan because that seemed to be the best option at the time. However, I recently found that it seems to be lacking in flexibility and also in expressiveness. And so I wanted to give action policy a try, because action policy is much more code oriented. It uses actual conditions for expressing permissions and authorizations instead of codifying everything in a hash. So that seemed to be much more to my liking in terms of being explicit and being testable and things like that. However, when I started to introduce action policy into my application, it turned out that action policy needs Rails 5. And at that time, our hosting dashboard was still running on Rails 4.2. So on top of doing a few necessary security updates, I wanted to update Rails from 4.2 to 5.x, at least to 5.0. And I did that in the session, but I wasn't able to finish it because I was struggling with all the gem dependencies and things like that. So after the stream, I kept trying, and it was mostly done with a bundle update without any gem names. So a sweeping bundle update in the end did the trick. And then I only had to do a few strategic gem updates for the device gem and the audit gem, with a few database migrations, and that was it. I didn't post a recording of my session because I was mostly struggling, and I'm struggling with bundle update and repeating and trying different variations of bundle update, so I don't think it's very useful. It's still on Twitch, but I guess it won't be preserved on our YouTube account. So I can close this issue because both of these tasks are done, luckily. And now let's see what I've planned for today. So this was the plan actually for Tuesday. But since I had to run some errands, I wasn't able to do the session, and instead I tackled one of these tasks afterwards, which was create rake tasks for Docker. Just to give you a bit of background, I have Dockerized my whole development environment. And so the whole application, as well as the databases and the chef server and everything I need to develop and test my application, are running in containers. And so here's the Docker file, or the Docker compose file. Let me see. Docker compose YAML. So there is an app container running the Rails app, and then there are containers for Postgres, Redis, and Chef, which means that I also have to run my tests in the app container. And before, I had to run stuff like, let me see, compose exec. Yeah, stuff like this, Docker compose exec app, so run it in the app container, and then bundle exec rails db migrate. And that's just unwieldy, and I wanted to have a few rake commands that I can use instead. And simply by making a few minor additions to my rake file, I was able to add a few commands under the Docker namespace. So now I can execute docker start, docker test, docker spec, docker migrate, or even docker nuke-db to initialize the database, the development database completely, which is pretty handy. I can now simply run rake docker spec, which is easy to remember, and it'll do the necessary stuff. So that's done already, and now, since all the prerequisites are done, I can now resume trying out action policy. I've already done some work on this as well, and I'll simply show you what I've done and where I am. Before I get into this, the usual preliminary stuff, if there is anything you'd like to say or to ask, please use the chat. I'm always happy to have conversations with you, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. To be more precise, if I seem to be not making sense, so don't hold back, just let me know if there's something you have on your chest. Alrighty. I think this music is a bit too distracting. This looks much better. Okay. So where are we? Before I had CanCanCan as my authorization gem, and it looked like this. Let me see if I can get the file from the master branch. Master app models ability.rb. Brilliant. So CanCan and its successor CanCanCan worked like this. You have this can keyword here, then you assign a permission, and the model the permission is going to be applied to, and then you define the permission conditions in the form of a hash. So here in this case, I said, okay, let's see, the auxiliary domain, for example, is connected to the website, and a user can read an auxiliary domain if this domain's website, if this domain's website's cluster's company ID equals the user's company ID. So this is already pretty convoluted. And on top of that, it also pretty much violates the law of Demeter, which means if you have an object, you shouldn't use knowledge about its dependent objects. This might not be 100% correct. What it means is, if I have a website object, I only can go one level deep. So I can say, okay, I know that websites have a cluster to which they belong, and that's it. But I can't then go on and say, and I know that this cluster has, for example, a company or a company ID. That needs some abstraction so that I can work this out by going just a single level deep. Okay, so that's actually not possible with CanCanCan because this hash notation doesn't very much give me this level of abstraction. And then again, CanCanCan also seemed to have a hard time expressing has many through associations. So the original thing that I wanted to do is connect a user directly to a website, and I couldn't make this work with CanCanCan. This might not even be a shortcoming of CanCanCan. Maybe I just didn't choose the right approach, but I reckoned if I have difficulties expressing this the right way, even though the documentation, the way that is described in the documentation didn't work for me, then maybe I shouldn't even use it in the first place. So that's when I decided, okay, let's try something different. And since action policy seems to be A, pretty fresh, and B, well maintained, and C, have a good design, I tried to use that. So now let's take a look at the way action policy does things. With action policy, you define policy classes, like this website policy here. And these classes simply need to provide conditions for the different actions a controller has. So if you are sticking to the standard controller layout, you'll need conditions for new and create, for edit and update, for delete if you have this action, and for show and index. And then you simply define methods with these question marks. So they are logical Boolean methods that return a logical value, and everything else pretty much happens because you simply go ahead and call authorize on an object. So let's go to website show. In the website's controller, I get the website that is requested, and then I simply call authorize for this particular website object, and action policy will then check this policy. So for the show condition, I've actually aliased that to the manage condition. So this gets delegated to manage, and manage concludes if it authorizes the user on this condition, if the user in question is an admin, or if, and now we come to the point where we don't really have to violate the law of Demeter, and we can delegate stuff, or if this user is allowed to manage the website's cluster. So instead of saying, okay, I take this website and then I get its cluster and then the company ID of the cluster and compare that to the user's company ID, I simply tell action policy, well, if a user is allowed to manage the cluster, they are also allowed to manage the website. And that's what I meant with being explicit and expressive. That's something that you can really read and understand. And I think it's a great alternative to the hash-based notation that I had with CanCanCan. And now my job is to replace everything with these policies, which I've already done, but I haven't defined all the necessary methods here. I started by simply defining a read and an update method, but that's not sufficient for the way action policy actually works, because action policy derives the necessary condition from the controller action. So if we are in the show action here, it'll call show ? If we are in the edit action and call authorize, it'll call the edit ? Method, and so on and so on. So that's something I'll have to add. I've added it for quite a few models and controllers already, but as my existing specs show, I'm not finished yet. And that's what I'm going to do in today's session. So let's wait for RSpec to do its thing, and then I'll see where I have to continue work. So in the beginning I had about 80 failures, and I've managed to reduce the number to about 40 or 50. As soon as you start touching a few of these policies, it'll quickly go down. 49 failures. The day before yesterday I was still at 82 failures, so let's see. What seems to be a problem is the edge routers controller spec. I'll tackle the controller tests first, and I'll get to the feature tests later, because they might even be resolved on the way. So let's take a look at the edge routers controller here. I guess I can close this, and let's go to the edge routers controller, open the tests. So we pretty much have the usual stuff. We have an index method and an authorize method and a new method and create method. And let's go ahead and open the edge routers policy. Oh, we don't even have a policy, so that might be the cause that it doesn't work. So we'll have to create a policy file for this. Okay, so we'll have to create a app policy edge router policy.rb, and let's also create a test for this spec policies edge router policy spec.rb. So we have both. And I guess I'll have to take another look at the old ability file. Strange that I didn't already have a policy for this. I thought I had created all of the policies, no? Not exactly. Okay. So, the cause is that I also didn't have any CanCan conditions for edge routers. Because probably edge routers can only be maintained by admins, and that's where the catch-all rule here came in. Okay. So this will make the policy pretty simple. Edge router policy. So action policy does have a default rule, which we can use here. Let me see. Did they miss documenting that part? Let's take a look at the README. That's strange. Oh, it's probably under aliases. Here we go. Default rule. Default underscore rule and then manage. So default underscore rule manage, and then we can define manage simply with user is admin. Which makes testing this policy equally simple, because I can simply say describe edge router policy. Let's quickly focus my tests on this one. It allows access to admin users. And we need a user, so let's simply create one. Build stub user, and this user needs to have the admin trait. And then we'll need an edge router. Build stub edge router. And then we need a policy, and I simply copy that from the website policy spec. Which basically says, okay, take this edge router and apply the policy on this user, and policy show, for example, should be true, and write access, for example, in the update method should also be true. Let's run this test. Since I've declared it as a focus test, RSpec will only run this single test suite. Zero examples, okay. Syntax error. Syntax error. Inline 7. Okay, what did I do wrong? Oh, to be true. That doesn't work. To equal true. But other than that, I think should be good, shouldn't I? Strange, unexpected new line. In line 7. That's a strange error. Expecting and or okay, I definitely I'm overlooking something pretty basic. Let's simply describe do and then it do. And then we build this stuff and then I write the expectation. Oh, that's strange. Let's take this out altogether. still. What the heck? Completely stumped here. Well, we are off to a good start, aren't we? Can't even resolve simple syntax errors. Okay, there's something. Okay, let's take out everything. Okay, now it'll run everything because we don't have any examples anymore. That's not exactly what I had in mind. Let's abort this. Is it this focus thing? Can't be. It actually focused on it. Let's introduce a context here anyway. If user is admin, it allows access. This is pretty strange. Oh, it's not in the spec file, it's in the edge router policy file. Crap. Of course. There is no do after class. Okay. Yep. It's really an advantage to be able to read. undefined method default rule. What? Oh, we need to derive this from application policy. Of course. Now show is okay. I see. Yeah. Okay. While this will work in the context of the Rails application, where there doesn't need to be a show method because the default rule is manage. These default rules and other aliases only work during a call to authorize. That's exactly the difference between alias rule, which is a construct provided by action policy, and alias, which is a Ruby keyword that creates aliases for methods. I can't use these action policy aliases in my tests, so I actually have to call the existing method manage, and that's it. That should work. And then I can copy this test and run it as a non-admin user, and it should also work by returning false, of course. Yep, here we go, and let's add another context here. So if user is not an admin, which is easy to achieve, it does not allow access. Hey, nice. So let's take off the focus and commit what we have. No, not fix, but actually add edge router policy. And let's see how many failures we have now. What did we have? 49. We still do have failures. But we're down to 47. just see that we have a few errors in policy tests. I guess I should resolve that first, because if that doesn't work, everything else will not work either. So let's simply replace these files in cluster policy spec, and in this case cluster policy, and this I think already worked once. Ah, yeah, I see. I'm still using read and update here, and I've already switched to the controller action stuff, so I need to check this differently. I need to check manage, because mostly everything is delegated to manage. Also should check the case of new and create. Should allow creating cluster. If a user owns the cluster, it should allow access, which mostly means manage, and yeah, that's it basically. But it should not allow deletion. So that's another effect that I like about this replacing the gem. My test suite gets much more robust because I see gaps where I should have had tests in the first place. So if the user does not own the cluster, it should not allow access, which means basically we don't have manage permission. It also should not allow deletion. Oh. We can add this right here. And if a user is an admin, they should be able to manage and to delete. So let's make this a focus test to speed things up. Five examples, 0 failures, that's great. Let's remove the focus and run the tests again. And it looks like I'll tackle the SSH keys controller tests next. good. Let's see how many failures we have. 44. Yep, that was to be expected. So let's take a look at the SSH keys policy and spec. Okay, we still have read and update, and we have to add a few things here to make the controller work, and also get rid of these let commands here because they are not the coding style that I like. I used them back in the day because it seemed to be the way to go, but let actually has a few downsides instead of being explicit within the tests. So we'll actually go ahead and say, okay, we need all this stuff in each test. That's a bit of repetition, but makes things much clearer. And instead of just declaring a nil user, we'll use this one. Okay, and instead of subject read, we'll use policy read. Probably have to replace that anyway, and now let's do the other stuff. We'll use actual instances. Oops. That, and I guess we can combine this. And in this case, we have simply a user that does not own the cluster, which just means that we create the user with its own company. And we'll have to switch. And instead of create, I can get away with build stopped, I guess. You don't have to create actual database records. And if you don't, using build stopped instead of create will speed up the tests. So that's that, and simply say it should allow access and it should not allow access. And since we do have read, update and manage, so for our tests this should probably be okay. It only won't work with the controllers later, but let's see if it works standalone. Oh, it doesn't even work with this. Missing policy authorization context user. Oh yes, let's see. Oh, that's okay. I guess. Oh yeah, I can't use subject here. I need to use policy. Another indirection we don't need. If you're curious why I'm not using let and subject, there's a nice article from Thoughtbot where they explain the reasons. It's mainly that it introduces an anti-pattern called the mystery guest, because you have your test specification and it uses information that is defined outside of the specification. Somewhere is some kind of let with a code block that magically creates stuff on the fly, and that can become hard to maintain, and by simply using local variables within these test blocks, we can get rid of this anti-pattern. I'm sorry. So this should work. And it does. Nice. So, however, for the controllers to work, we need to define a few things. So let's see. An SSH key is coupled to a website, so we definitely don't do it like this, where I again violate the law of Demeter, and simply by counting the dots, that's easily visible, because, well, since I can't go deeper than one level, there can't be more than one single dot, and there are three. And I can simply use the delegation that's possible here, where I can say if the user can manage the website this SSH key is supposed to be connected to, they can manage the SSH key as well, which is easy by saying allowed to manage the records, i.e. the SSH keys website. And we can allow introduce an alias rule that aliases new, create, edit, update. I'll have to add question marks, and delete. To manage. So all the standard actions are in this single method, and since in the unit test I have to be explicit, I can only use this single method here because it's the only method that actually exists. That's that, and I should be able to remove the focus here, and if I'm really lucky or really good, I've also resolved the SSH key controller failures. Let's see. If I made a stupid mistake, I've reintroduced even the policy failures, but let's hope not. Ooh. Okay, I seem to have forgotten a colon here. This needs to be a symbol. Weather update. Weather is still great. No rain, blue sky, sun, a little bit of wind, ideal conditions, and I'm very much looking forward to go outside in half an hour, so don't expect me to run over my time here. Okay, so... Oh! SSH key policy still fails. Stupid mistakes. And SSH keys controller does fail as well, but I guess that's might be connected. Huh. So, is it actually allowed to? Let's take a look at the aux domains policy. Allowed to question mark and then manage question mark and record website. So that's probably... Yep. Simple syntactical error. So if the SSH keys controller still has issues, we'll take a look at the controller and how it uses authorize. Policy is happy. We're down to 44 failures again, but the SSH keys controller spec still fails, and that might simply be because I've built it wrong. So let's open the SSH keys controller and its tests. So let me see. Oh yeah, it even has the old authorize calls for CanCanCan, so that can't work. And I'm actually authorizing the website here. Not sure if I like this. Well, let's start with fixing the authorize calls. And then let me think how to play this. So it actually tries to get the website because they are nested resources. SSH key is nested into the website. at least I would have to authorize with the website policy instead of the SSH key policy. Which action policy allows. However, I guess I should be a bit more explicit here as well, or more abstract in fact. To be honest, I'd like to skip this at the moment. So let's just force another policy lookup here. How do I do this? Yeah, we can call authorize. Okay, I can call it authorize website with website policy. I guess I should authorize this here as well, this time with the SSH key policy. Oh, that's already built into find key and authorize here. Okay. Okay, I guess that should do the trick. Let's focus on this test file. You. So this should bring us down to 40 failures, if my count is correct. 38. We even got a bonus of 2 resolved issues. Great. Now let's take it from the top. The Edge Router's controller spec still has issues. Wait, that's already where we need to be. Let's take a closer look. Okay, index. Okay, calls authorized because we need to have the admin access, I guess. Okay. So let's take a closer look why they fail. So it looks like we simply don't get authorized for new, create, and index. 2 of the examples are successful though. So new, create, and index. So let's take a look at the policy again. Policy. Everything is delegated to manage, and manage checks if the user is an admin. This one actually works, so let's close these windows and go back to this. What's different for index, new, and create? Strange. Get show, for example, does work. Get new doesn't. I could make this more logical. Shouldn't make a difference because authorize always checks only if the user is an admin and regardless of the actual object, but this is more future-proof, I guess. two failures. New and index. Which actually are the... Why doesn't new work? More importantly, why doesn't index work? If index doesn't even work. That's strange. Default rule. Oh, because my test actually is incomplete. That's the reason. I just call new, and obviously I didn't even check the authorization, or I didn't make the necessary preparations to be authorized. No. That's a before action. It always creates an admin user and calls new. Here we have a before each, where we create an admin user. Huh. Why is this called admin user, not user with the admin trait? Oh no, everything fails. Okay. Looks like I shouldn't change things willy-nilly. again. Don't change things just willy-nilly. Really not sure. Show, for example, does work. And index doesn't call authorize with an edge router object and might fail because of that, but a new fails too, and it does have an edge router object. Well, there might be two different reasons. Hey QP, nice to have you on the channel. You get redirect on index, so there are two possible reasons: before actions in application controller. Yep, I should take a look at that with redirect, or to authorize issues. Yeah. Let's take a look at the application controller. Application controller does verify that we authorize in the first place, except for the index method, but even in this case we do authorize for the index method. And other than that, I don't do much stuff here. Did you mean that I get redirected if I call the index method? I wouldn't know why I should be redirected though. Hey Nar, welcome back. Good to see you. How you doing? I'm fine. Just going after a few strange issues here. I'm pretty sure it's something very basic again. And it's the usual stuff where I call it at 5 and 8 minutes later I find the issue. So let's see. We have our two failures. Index does fail and I get a redirect. Oh, that's what you meant. I get a redirect. Yeah, the redirect is because well, I guess it's probable that I get redirected because authorization doesn't work. It's mostly the only reason why I should be redirected. And why does authorization not work? I have my admin user that is logged in as with all the other tests, and then I simply call getIndex, and that should work and should then display the only edge router record I've created. And in this case I call authorize. Yeah, I should, because authorize will then make sure that the current user is an admin. You can try to add binding prior and the other. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, having to debug this, but I guess there's no way around this. Oh, you ask, knowing basics of JavaScript, is it possible to apply for an internship? Uh, Internship where? Depends probably where you'd like to apply. Okay, so I guess if it comes down to debugging, that's certainly something I won't start 6 minutes before the end of my slot today. I'd rather go out and enjoy the sun for a bit. But yeah, I guess I should take a closer look at this. Well, I could try to do a bit of hands-on debugging by using something like this. Do you mean applying at my company? So, it is an admin. So authorization should work. You're right. I shouldn't be afraid of debugging, but actually, I think I didn't. Have I used pry before? I'm not really sure. The thing is, there has been quite a long break in maintaining this software, and so I'd have to really look up how to use pry, and that's not something I'm going to do in these last minutes. Simply because you'd only see me reading up on that stuff. Any other internship companies have given more opportunity, but skills are the key. Skills always are the key. But I guess with basic JavaScript knowledge, you should look for front-end development internships. We don't develop web applications, and so I wouldn't know where you should be able to apply, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there are companies that do internships for web front-end development. Okay. Yeah, so I guess there is some debugging in my future, and I'll take a look at this. It should be easy to find out then, with just doing a breakpoint there and seeing what user is actually there, and what happens if I call the policy by hand. Okay, okay, you got me. I'll give this a try. Let me see. Um, so I just require binding dot pry, right? Do I have to? I think I even have pry in my gem file. Let's make sure. Nope. Well, I should have, shouldn't I? Let's see. Pry. Oh, bug. Yeah. Yeah, I do have that. Good. So let's see. And then I just say bug, and I should be okay. Let's see. Okay, now I'm going over time, but I guess it's worth it. So QP, what's actually what is it you do? Obviously, you do have some experience in Rails development. So, what? Failure error by bug? Undefined local variable or method? What? Is this limited to the actual application? So I don't call it in the test, but in the index method. You don't do anything. Yeah, okay. But at least you have some background in this stuff. And it's great to be able to exchange ideas here. Okay, still doesn't work. And it actually bombs with bybug. Undefined local variable method bybug. Ah, yeah, no. Yeah, okay. The thing is, I probably have listed bybug in development and not in testing. So this needs to go down here. So let's do bundle install, but that should be okay. And now There we go. We are in index and right before authorize. So let's see, the edge routers variable should have one edge router. Yep. And how about current user? He's an admin. Okay, so now let's call action policy and see how this works. But how do we call it by hand? Oh yeah, I can say action policy new. No, I need an edge router policy new for nil and now p manage is true. So authorize should work. Oh, the ice cream van. You're right. I should be able to call authorize, right? Authorize. Huh. Okay. Well, that is strange. Tried to this did work when I called it directly, and now that I've called authorize, it should use the edge router z. No, the edge router policy, yeah. Edge router policy with index, which is defaulted to manage. This is really strange. It's the first time that I'm running into these problems as well. Maybe I simply can't call authorize without an object? No. That can't be it. Can it? Let's try. This might be the first time that I'm doing authorization not based on an actual object, because I'm simply checking the admin role, and that might be why I haven't encountered this issue before. So let's see, we have a current user who is an admin. Let's see what happens if I call authorize. New. Still. Okay, folks, I guess I'm simply blocked at the moment, and I guess it's a good time to call it and resume with a fresh brain and fresh eyes. Something's not right here, and I really don't know what, but I'll definitely get back to you in my next session and tell you the probably very simple reason that I didn't succeed here. Thanks a lot for being here, working this out with me, and I hope you'll be there next time when I'm doing my live stream, which will be next week on Tuesday, same time, 3:30 p.m. GMT. And if you haven't yet followed my channel, please do so. It'll really help the channel, and it'll get you notified when I'm back online. And have a great day. Cheers.